for Lucille Clifton's poem, The Birth of Language. When words arose in the flesh. After Adam opened his ears to the languages of the world's garden speaking, in countless wondrous tongues, from the flowing streams, the wind-kissed trees, the rolling hills, the sun, the songbirds, to the tumbling clouds. Was it then, when he embodied them and opened his mouth to answer, that his words, the first words of an awakened man, arose, were heard by a listening woman named Eve, and all the receivers in that speaking garden? Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in after, before, or between your comings, goings, and doings of the day. Time to ease back. I'm delighted to have you here for show 174, coming to you live from the coast of Rhode Island, where the conversations range from sweet to salty, and always for me, New England friendly. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Last week's show was the exotic and the erotic, which, as I said, we could all do with more of in our lives and in our imaginations. Our experiences of one or both, the spice of them, the frissons we get from them, the senses and feelings they rouse and arouse in us, sometimes powerfully, sometimes provocatively. How they can be, actually it's interesting that there's a siren, a siren happening around me talking about that. That's very funny. But yes, how they can be delightfully to deliciously stimulating, heightening, inviting. It was a good tingling show. Certainly I felt that, and others who wrote me and said so too. Well, this week, how we speak, how we listen. Beyond what we say to the ways we talk, communicate, articulate. Likewise, the spectrum of ways we listen, from deeply at one end to barely or not at all at the other. So, not just how, but also how well, especially in this age of mass distraction and ever more disembodied forms of connecting and conversing that we're in, which is why I chose this topic for us. Even with the many challenges, there's still so much opportunity for us to speak and listen ever more clearly, committedly, and satisfyingly. The rewards far outweigh the effort, part of which is bringing your real, whole presence. So I've curated a quiver of cultural commentary, quotes, poetry, and anecdotes for us that speak to the heart of our theme. Let's make our way there together and see what inspires, what we discover as we go. From the Ansonia Hotel in New York City, February 2017. I'm not a talking head. I'm a talking heart, a talking soul, a talking body, who speaks with the energies and cosmologies of a whole being, who voices from a solar plexus place, who converses in a language felt more than heard, understood beyond mind, beyond words. Khalil Gibran from The Prophet on talking. And then a scholar said, "Speak of talking." And he answered saying, "You talk when you cease to be at peace with your thoughts, and when you can no longer dwell in the solitude of your heart. You live in your lips, and sound is a diversion and a pastime. And in much of your talking, thinking is half murdered. For thought is a bird of space that in a cage of words may indeed unfold its wings, but cannot fly. There are those among you who seek the talkative through fear of being alone. The silence of aloneness reveals to their eyes the naked selves, and they would escape. And there are those who talk, and without knowledge or forethought reveal a truth which they themselves do not understand. And there are those who have the truth within them, but they tell it not in words. In the bosom of such as these, the Spirit dwells in rhythmic silence. When you meet your friend on the roadside or in the marketplace, let the Spirit in you move your lips and direct your tongue. Let the voice within your voice speak to the ear or his ear. For his soul will keep the truth of your heart, as the taste of the wine is remembered when the color is forgotten and the vessel is no more. Thank you. Khalil Gibran. That was from 1923. Diane Thiel, Thiel, listening in deep space. We've always been out looking for answers, telling stories about ourselves, searching for connection, choosing to send out Stravinsky and whale song, which, in translation, might very well be our undoing instead of a welcome. We launch satellites, probes, telescopes unfolding like origami, navigating geomagnetic storms, major disruptions, rovers with spirit and perseverance mapping the unknown. We listen through large arrays adjusted eagerly to hear the news that we are not alone. Considering the history at home, in houses, across continents, oceans, even in quests armed with good intentions, what one seeker has done to another, what will we do when we find each other? Thank you, Diane Thiel, listening in deep space from her collection Questions from Outer Space. In The Marginalian, Maria Popova says this: every act of communication is an act of tremendous courage in which we give ourselves over to two parallel possibilities. The possibility of planting into another mind a seed sprouted in ours and watching it blossom into a breathtaking flower of mutual understanding, and the possibility of being wholly misunderstood, reduced to a withering weed. Candor and clarity go a long way in fertilizing the soil, but in the end, there is always a degree of unpredictability in the climate of communication. And I was reading that, and then I was reading the poet and writer Ursula Le Guin, Guin, on the magic of real human conversation. This is in her book, The Wave in the Mind, which is a wonderful read. So here's from that. When you speak a word to a listener, the speaking is an act, and it is a mutual act. The listener's listening enables the speaker's speaking. It is a shared event, intersubjective. The listener and the speaker entrain with each other. Both the amoebas are equally responsible, equally physically, immediately involved in sharing bits of themselves. The voice creates a sphere around it, which includes all its hearers, an intimate sphere or area, limited in both space and time. This is why utterance is magic. Words do have power. Names have power. Words are events. They do things, change things. They transform both speaker and hearer. They feed energy back and forth and amplify it. They feed understanding or emotion back and forth and amplify it. Ursula Le Guin. And then the marvelous, great humanistic philosopher and psychologist, Erich Fromm, F-R-O-M-M. This is from his book, The Art of Listening. Excellent book. Well, he has 6 rules of listening that I thought were superb. Tying that in with a quote by Hannah Arendt, the historian, an experience makes its appearance only when it is being said. So here are Fromm. He writes that it's an art, like the understanding of poetry, and like any art has its own rules and norms. Well, he had a half-century practice as a therapist, and his guidelines on mastering the art of unselfish understanding. Here they are. Number 1, the basic rule for practicing this art is the complete concentration of the listener. 2, nothing of importance must be on his or her mind. They must be optimally free from anxiety as well as from greed. 3, they must possess a freely working imagination sufficiently concrete to be expressed in words. 4, they must be endowed with a capacity for empathy with another person and strong enough to feel the experience of the other as if it were their own. 5, the condition for such empathy is a crucial facet of the capacity for love. To understand another means to love them, not in the erotic sense, but in the sense of reaching out to them and of overcoming the fear of losing oneself. And last, understanding and loving are inseparable. If they are separate, it is a cerebral process, and the door to essential understanding remains closed. Erich Fromm, thank you for that. Out in the ether. He's long gone, but his good words are present. Okay, from the legendary physicist David Bohm, Bohm, on the paradox of communication, the crucial difference between discussion and dialogue, and what's keeping us from listening to one another. His book is called On Dialogue. So we go back to Ursula Le Guin for a moment, who wrote in a meditation on the magic of real human communication we were just talking about. Transform both speaker and hearer. They feed energy back and forth and amplify it. Well, what happens in a cultural ecosystem where the hearer has gone extinct and the speaker has gone rampant? Where do transformation and understanding go? So Bohm says, in spite of this worldwide system of linkages, there is at this very moment a general feeling, and by the way, he wrote this in the 1970s. If he only could be here now, it's on steroids. In spite of this worldwide system of linkages, there is at this very moment a general feeling that communication is breaking down everywhere on an unparalleled scale. What appears in the media is generally at best a collection of trivial and almost unrelated fragments, while at worst it can often be a really harmful source of confusion and misinformation. We've been hearing that word lately. Different groups are not actually able to listen to each other. As a result, the very attempt to improve communication leads frequently to yet more confusion, and the consequent sense of frustration inclines people ever further toward aggression and violence rather than toward mutual understanding and trust. So, one meaning, he says, of, quote, to communicate is to make something common, that is, to convey information or knowledge from one person to another in as an accurate way as possible. Dialogue. In a dialogue, each person does not attempt to make common certain ideas or items of information already known to them. Rather, it may be said that the two people are making something in common, creating something new together. I love that thought. And then last, before some other poems, is how to listen between the lines. The actor, playwright, educator Anna Deavere Smith, who also is the founder and director of Harvard's Institute on the Arts and Civic Dialogue, if you don't know about that. This is from her book, Talk to Me, on the art of listening in a culture of speaking. How about that? It's a good title. So here's what she said. The idea is that the psychology of people is going to live right inside those moments when their grammar falls apart and, like being in a shipwreck, they are on their own to make it all work out. Well, she was looking for a way to get at precisely that unrehearsed language between people. And a linguist told her that there were 3 questions that might help crack the shell of that verbal habit, that sort of autopilot habit. Have you ever come close to death? Do you know the circumstances of your birth? And have you ever been accused of something you did not do? So she took those questions and a Panasonic tape recorder, very simple, and dogged dedication to what was at first just an intuitive insight. She made those the springboard for her interviews, but eventually stopped asking them and just listened. And she said, after I asked the questions, I would listen like I had never listened before, for people to begin to sing to me. That singing was the moment when they were really talking. So, there's another book to point you to. All right, friends. Questions about how you speak, how you listen. Have you given much thought or brought great awareness to just how you speak to others and how you listen, where you are on that spectrum of deeply or fully to lightly or barely or not really listening. And listening not just to the voice, the words, but sensing as much into the energy to and from, spirit, taking in the inflections, the gestures, tone, and other nuances that make up part of almost any exchange. Do you make it a practice of speaking with care, articulating, enunciating your words, what you're saying and expressing from your whole self, your natural self, your genuine self, and not on autopilot either? Interesting how some people can speak but sound homogeneous, not distinct at all. Well, I have a purpose, and make it a practice, as you may know or hear as you listen, to bring myself completely into the heart, the essence of whatever I'm saying, sharing, communicating, to do every word, sentence, phrase, paragraph, passage justice, to bring them to life from the page to you here, for instance, over the airwaves, to speak with zest. I think if I had one thing to say about all of this is speak with zest all the time. Well, the art of speaking this way and of listening well is beautiful, worthwhile, as I said earlier, and it's learnable, very easily learnable. How about any speeches that you've heard in your time or read in your life that were powerful, have stayed with you? What are those? Who gave the speech? Who in your world speaks wonderfully? And who listens superbly, like you're the only person on earth when you're with them? What's one of the best conversations you ever had? And why was it so satisfying? How did you learn to better talk beyond your childhood and to better listen? What do you like a lot about the way you go about either one of those? Or how would you like to talk or listen differently than you do now? Mark Nepo, the poet, Mark Nepo wrote in his book of Awakenings something that I live by best I can every day. Wherever I do not bring my entire self, I am not there. It certainly transcends just speaking. Friends, let's be there, ever more deeply present in our speaking and our listening, in our daily exchanges, dialogues, and conversations. The more fully and thoughtfully we communicate, the more fulfilling our lives and world will be. Of this, I'm sure. Robin Messersmith has this poem from June 2021. Morning Talk. On this morning, on the block, birds talking bird talk. Quiet traffic, tire talk. Rising sun, light talk. Paling night, blue talk. Breezing murmurs, wind talk. Pines tremor, tree talk. Woman inhaling, spirit talk. Man exhaling, soul talk. Bodies sore with wasted talk. World refraining from any talk. Softening silence, no need for talk. Eternity's reign of speechless love. Robin Messersmith. The notable French author André Gide said, "Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again." Good one. The Art of Listening by M.M. Owen, a British nonfiction author. To listen well is not only a kindness to others, but also, as the psychologist Carl Rogers made clear, a gift to ourselves. Writing in Esquire magazine in 1935, Ernest Hemingway offered this advice to young writers, quote, "When people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. Even though Hemingway was one of my teenage heroes, the realization crept up on me somewhere around the age of 25. I am most people. I never listen. Perhaps never was a little strong. As a culture, we treat listening as an automatic process about which there is not a lot to say, in the same category as digestion or blinking. When the concept of listening is addressed at any length, it's in the context of professional communication, something to be honed by leaders and mentors, but a specialization that everyone else can happily ignore. This neglect is a shame. Listening well, it took me too long to discover, is a sort of magic trick. Both parties soften, blossom. They are less alone. Along the way, I discovered that Carl Rogers, one of the 20th century's most eminent psychologists, had put a name to this underrated skill: active listening. And though his work was focused initially on the therapeutic setting, he drew no distinction between this and everyday life. Quote, "Whatever I have learned," he wrote, "is applicable to all of my human relationships." What Rogers learned was that listening well, which necessarily involves conversing well and questioning well, is one of the most accessible and most powerful forms of connection we have. Thank you, M.M. Owen. The English essayist, novelist Ian McEwan, McEwan, from his novel Nutshell, if you haven't read that. We live in a new era, mostly of self-expression, but not so much of listening. We are not Hamlet so much these days. We are broadcasters of the self. Selfhood is extremely important, of course. Who can deny it? But when you make the self the outer limit of your politics, you then begin to ignore a great deal of the attitudes, situations, dilemmas, misery of others. So there should be a limit, I think, on the limiting factor of selfhood. Listening, that is, abandoning the self and abandoning yourself to another's point of view, is what the internet has not really given us. It's given us trolls, it's given us tsunamis of opinion. Perhaps it'll take a bend in the future that we can't yet foresee. I hope so. I hope he's right about that. May it come soon. I think it's time. And then one more thing here from the founder of Humans of New York, Brandon Stanton, in his book, Humans of New York Stories. Wonderful, wonderful. If you haven't seen that anywhere, or they have a site too, I believe. Being social is a learned skill. Being social, talking to people, communicating with people is something that can be developed just like any other skill, algebra or spelling. I was so scared when I first started Humans of New York. I was just terrified of talking to strangers. I didn't know if it was something you could do. Now it's second nature. Talking to people or approaching anyone is something I don't even think about. It's not something I have to build up the courage to do. It was an earned skill. Like that. This is one of mine on Mother's Day, May 2023, last year. Tell me, Mother. Tell me the story of your life as a mother. Your mothering journey. In your own words, your own way. How it began, how it unfolded, what your true passions were, your triumphs, your hopes and sadnesses, especially the unspoken ones. Your questionings, your learnings, what you gave of yourself, freely or dutifully. What needed mothering of yourself you had to give up along the way, and where it led you. I want to hear, to know, so I can better see and appreciate you, Mother. Affirm or feel compassion for you. Be able to bring the weave of the dark and light threads of your own voiced story as a mother, as a woman, through the fabric of my consciousness, through the heart of not one but all my days. Tell me, Mother. I am listening. Kathleen Calvert, Calbert, listening to my mother in the Alzheimer's wing. These people are a little crazy. Who's that singing? I loved all my babies. It's like a movie. You were the star in my sky. How's your baby? Is that my daughter on TV? Is this really happening? Don't you have a baby? Are you having the same dream? You look like you're barely 18. Maybe you could still have a baby. I had such a young mother. I cried for years when she left me on the farm with her grandmother, who killed chickens with her bare hands. Who's going to come and get me? Mine will be a very old baby. You've been my best friend, Kathleen. Could you help me find my dream? Thank you, Kathleen Calbert. Beautiful. New poem and poet to me. This is a musing related to me by my friend in New York, Enrique Enriquez, who is also, as a matter of fact, among the deeper well-dwellers that I've been conversing with in the poetosphere. If you haven't been there yet, there are many good things there, including all kinds of deeper well-dweller conversations. But this is something he shared with me, and I thought very apropos of our show tonight. It's about a chance conversation he had one day, recently. The Brotherhood of the Beards got me talking today with Giacomo, a man my age who I sometimes see in the cafe. He is half Sicilian, half Irish. His beard is whiter and his eyes are blue. "What kind of business are you in?" he asked today. I told him that I used to be a fortune teller and now I only listen to the birds. My mother, who was very skeptical, always said that the birds are the eyes of God, he told me, as he showed me the picture of his canary, a perfectly yellow fellow he had heard singing in a pet store the day he went to buy food for his son's snake. I noticed the light in the photo, and he confessed to being an expert in lighting, who has brought light to many museums, also Coney Island. As usual, we began by speaking of the light out there and ended up speaking of that other light. Thank you, Enrique. Wonderful sharing. Anecdote. Alicia Ostreicher has this poem, Locker Room Conversation. There are some men my husband never sees with their pants on, though they work at the same university, guys from other departments. Men, it seems, don't bother wearing towels in the locker room, though at his age there's often plenty to hide. He and his buddies have eyed each other for so many years on and off the squash court. What would be the point? In the shower they chat about their games, about the last op-ed, or they gossip and tell jokes and do business. He likes to describe this camaraderie, and I like to imagine the naked men in their various stages of beauty and decay, splashing, surrounded by brightly falling water. The muscular definition of smooth youth, the humorous pouchiness of the middle-aged, the crisp ligaments of the old, that squashy layer of boy fat under the skin at last consumed. Their bodies like engravings you could title Persistence or Integrity. And sometimes even the very old, softened again like very old wool, all showering in a hum of conversation. He likes to mention some of the specimens I would enjoy, the big-necked boy athletes. The Indian MD in his 50s, graceful as Shiva. Today, he tells me, someone he's never seen walked into the shower, a kid near 7 feet, black curly hair, bronze except for a bikini mark, blue eyes, face of an angel, body of a Greek hero, thighs the circumference of my husband's waist, dong of a god, and conversations stopped. Every man just soaped and rinsed himself. Afterward, as they dressed, my husband asked a couple of friends, "What did you think of that guy?" "What guy?" they said. I love that poem. I hope you did too. Alicia Ostreicher, Locker Room Conversation. Great twist at the end. Thank you. Okay. Sharon Bryan, another new poet to me, saying things. Adam was born blind. He could hear burbles, drips, trickles, whirs and chirps, snorts, snuffles, grunts, thuds, thumps, and creaks. He could hear a voice muttering in his head. It said, "Open your mouth, let the words fly out." And when he saw scarlet tanager, he saw a bright bird. When he said pine tree, the bird landed on a branch. He said grassy bank, and sat down himself, clear stream, and drank. He said sun, there was almost too much light. Moon, that was better. He was beginning to get the hang of this. Stars were so far away they made him lonely. Cassiopeia, he said, and they came a little closer. Well, 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 he said, and 3 deep holes appeared, brimming with water. Then he couldn't resist. He said, "Hot damn, holy shit, what the hell is going on?" And the voice in his head said, Wash your mouth out with soap. A lathered bar slipped from his hand and slid across the floor. What we need, the voice said, is a woman around the house. And there she was in the window, setting something on the sill. Adam, honey, you must be hungry. This apple pie will be cool soon. What Adam came to like best was lying with her in the dark. It took him back to his earliest memories before he could hear himself think, before all the razzle-dazzle. Good one. Thank you, Sharon Brian. Thank you. It's funny, we obviously started with Adam in the Garden of Eden, and then I thought it'd be fun to have another atomistic poem. Okay, well, I had transporting experiences in the Aegean back in the summers of 2012 and 2013. They all began this way, on the island of Hydroussa, Kea, in the Cyclades in Greece. Let the gods speak. Let the sea and wind gods speak to me, sing to me of their storms and serenities. Let the dry earth yield up its new and ancient fruits and flowers, its hidden waters. Let the clear air carry my own voice into these hills, into these stones, into this sea. That's how it began. I spoke earlier of gestures. Yes, as in those around conversing and communicating, and who does it more abundantly and beautifully than the Italians? So this was back in a couple of decades ago, one of my earliest trips to Italia. This was on the Via del Gesù in Rome. Trattoria Anno Domini. 1,000 years later, on the Via del Gesù, 2 Roman noses, uno piccolo, uno grande, converse across a table, hands waving like wands in movements ancient and familiar. Remembered as if it was yesterday. And again in the Cyclades, the actor, the mayor and the lottery seller, Porianis, Stelios and Stephanos, over ouzo, onion pie, cremidopita, octopus, calamari, a wavelet of yogurt with quince. 3 men from this island world, from this island earth, converse, eat, laugh, love, at a simple table by the sea, by the moon, by the leave of unseen gods or graces. Yes, think of how we can flow together with such ease and joy when we let ourselves. Stephen Dunn. Little essay on communication. Safe to say that most men who want to communicate, who would use that word, are shameless, and their souls long ago have drifted out of their bodies to faraway, unpolluted air. Such men, no doubt, have learned women are starved for communication. That is the new way to get new women. An admission of weakness works best for all. Even some smart women are fooled, though the smartest know that to communicate is a form of withholding, a commercial for intimacy while the heart hides in its little pocket of words. And women use the word too. Everyone uses it who doesn't have the gift of communication. It's like the abused asking for love, never having known what it feels like, not trusting it if it lacks pain. But let's say a good man and a good woman, with no motives other than desire for greater closeness, who've heard communication is the answer. Sign up for a course at the Y. Seek counseling. Set aside 2 hours in the week for significant talk. What hope for them? Should we tell them very little or none at all? As little or none as there is for us, who've cut right to the heart and still conceal, who've loved many times well into the night in good silence and have awakened strangely distant, thinking thoughts no one should ever know? Stephen Dunn, thank you. Interesting poem. I had not read that before today. And by the way, you may know this, but I don't rehearse any of these. I like to just have them as they come in, as I'm reading them. I choose them. They feel right. I might Just read a bit of them just to get a feeling of them, and then let them spring their magic upon me and through me to you on the broadcast. Just letting you know that. Well, think of how we receive in conversation and how different mediums of exchange, from face-to-face to telephone to Skype or Zoom, affected very much, I would say. Yeah, think about that sometime, or just experiment with that. Jessica Greenbaum's poem, I had just hung up from talking to you. I had just hung up from talking to you, and we had been so immersed in the difficulty you were facing. And forgive me, I was thinking that as long as we kept talking, you in your car in the parking lot of the boys' school as the afternoon deepened into early evening, and me in the study, all the books around that had been sources of beauty to us, as long as we stayed in the conversation, padded with history like the floor of the pine forest, as long as I thought out loud, made a joke at my own expense, you would be harbored in that exchange. But the boys were leaving the track, and after we hung up, I looked out the window to see the top of the bare January trees spotlit to silvery red, massive, but made from the thinnest twigs at the ends of the branches, at the ends of the limbs. They were waving and shining in a light like no other, and left only to them. Thank you for that poem. From Dr. Mark Sircus, sounds like circus, but it's Sircus, and his book, Mindless Psychology. How about that for a title? He said, my online life was a great place to apply communication psychology, my greatest love, which I created and have applied almost daily. The subset and most crucial aspect of this is listening psychology. To listen is to suffer because we do not want to listen to anything that might require a change. To listen is to change. We cannot change without listening. Listening implies a change. We need to change just to listen. That was interesting. As was Thich Nhat Hanh on the art of deep listening. This is from his book, Fear, Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm. It's mainly about relationships, but, well, all conversations involve some kind of relationship, but more largely, I think he was really talking about. If we are sincere in wanting to learn the truth, and if we know how to use gentle speech, and deep listening, we are much more likely to be able to hear others' honest perceptions and feelings. In that process, we may discover that they too have wrong perceptions. After listening to them fully, we have an opportunity to help them correct their wrong perceptions. If we approach our hurts that way, we have the chance to turn our fear and anger into opportunities for deeper, more honest relationships. The intention of deep listening and loving speech is to restore communication, because once communication is restored, everything is possible, including peace and reconciliation. Thank you, Thich Nhat Hanh, always. What a wise man he was. Wise monk. From psychologytoday.com. We are what we speak. To improve the quality of your life, take a close look at your language. George Orwell said, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Whether or not we believe we're beautiful, powerful, or full of energy, studies have shown that our confidence and alertness begin to increase simply by telling ourselves that we are. The opposite is also true. When we speak negatively of ourselves and the world around us, those words impact our state of mind and well-being. This is the case for even offhand comments. We often say that we're tired, that we wish it were Friday, or that we're bored, thinking we're just making conversation, yet our words, even when we say them reflexively, even when we don't actually feel that way at the moment, bring those feelings to life inside us. Well, I underscore that and second that motion. That is so true. I'm often speaking to others about something we don't realize how powerful the things we tell ourselves are, or that we're telling ourselves in whatever we're saying. Yeah, very much so. My favorite example is that you're having a fabulous time. You're at a dinner party. You're somewhere enjoying yourself immensely. You lose track of all time. But you're in a joyful, energized state, and someone says, "Oh my God, it's 3 a.m," and then suddenly all your energy goes away, sapped you to feel, "Oh, I've got to immediately lie down." How about that? That is one of those things. That's a good example. Think about that. from educba.com by Jasal Shethna. How to improve the way we speak. Talking and eloquence are not the same. To speak and to speak well are two things. That was Ben Jonson, the renowned English writer from way back. Okay, even though we learn to talk at a very young age, it takes us a lifetime to learn to speak, with the chances being that we may never learn to communicate well. No matter how good we are, there's always scope for us to improve our communication skills and how we speak. Language communication is a vast field with great content for improvement throughout our life. That is, if we do not quit trying. All we need is commitment and the will to practice. When we speak, our voice and tone are as important as our words. Our communication style, unbeknownst to us, reveals quite a lot about us to the listeners. Anyone paying attention to our voice and tone of speech can understand our emotional state, our levels of confidence, our command over the language, and our geographical roots through the accent we may have acquired. We can be made or marred by what we say, so how we speak is important in our lives. We can always appreciate the power of speech, the speeches that changed the world, like the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill's first speech as Britain's Prime Minister, or I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, would not have been as effective if the speakers had not mastered what they have to say, how they have to say it, and what passion should be induced in those words to drive the point home. Moreover, the speech is made powerful by those great men's belief in their comments. Those exact revolutionary words would be highly dull, unpleasant, and uninspiring when told in grating, soft, low, or fake voices. The ability to communicate with clarity, courage, belief, and commitment leads to great revolutions and movements in our world, and I would add in ourselves. Yes. Besides the message and words themselves, the emotions that affect our voice, the tone, the pitch, and the confidence of the messenger are equally essential to make it revolutionary, motivational, or even understood rightly. Well said. Well, okay, coming into our last sharings and musings on how we speak, how we listen, Gloria Steinem, On the Road as a medium of listening in a culture deafened by speaking. She's the writer, activist, and trailblazing feminist. You may know of her, Gloria Steinem, Steinem, and her book, My Life on the Road. So, a slice from that. People in the same room understand and empathize with each other in a way that isn't possible on the page or the screen. Gradually, I became the last thing on earth I would ever have imagined, a public speaker and a gatherer of groups. And this brought an even bigger reward, public listening. What we're told about this country is way too limited by generalities, sound bites, and even the supposedly enlightened idea that there are two sides to every question. In fact, many questions have 3 or 7 or a dozen sides. Sometimes I think the only real division into two is between people who divide everything into two and those who don't. Altogether, if I'd been looking at nothing but the media all these years, I would be a much more discouraged person, especially given the notion that only conflict is news and that objectivity means being even-handedly negative. On the road, I learned that the media are not reality. Reality is reality. Thank you, Gloria Steinem. Like that. Okay. Getting a little excited. Or more excited. I'm always excited about something. Enthusiastic. Exuberant. Robert Frost, A Time to Talk. When a friend calls to me from the road and slows his horse to a meaning walk, I don't stand still and look around on all the hills I haven't hoed and shout from where I am, "What is it?" No, not as there is a time to talk. I thrust my hoe in the mellow ground, blade end up and 5 feet tall, and plod. I go up to the stone wall for a friendly visit. Thank you, Robert Frost. I have a poem I wanted to read you, but it's not that it's terribly long, but I want to keep us in time, so I'm going to pass on this. It's a poem by Donald Platt, Platt, point you to it, Aria for This Listening Area. It's very good, very good. So I'm going to pass on that for now. And I'm going to come back for a moment to Anna Deavere Smith from her book, Talk to Me. Some people use language as a mask, and some want to create designed language that appears to reveal them but does not. Yet from time to time, we are betrayed by language, if not in the words themselves, in the rhythm with which we deliver our words. Over time, I would learn to listen for those wonderful moments when people spoke a kind of personal music, which left a rhythmic architecture of who they were. Beautiful. Bernard Raymond, Raymund. Listener. Listener. I've been with old men, shadowy and slow, men dead and buried a long while ago, but the songs that they sang me, grave songs and sweet, held me the whole day stretched at their feet. Fire danced and water whirled to the tune, laughter went ringing down the long noon, but oh, what I loved most was not song at all, not the rich cadence, the silvery fall of passionless voices, kept me in thrall, but the unquenched ardor, pitying, wise, that lit their frail features and flamed in their eyes with a flame that transfigured starlight and dew. The deep peace of old men when singing is through. Thank you, Bernard Raymond. Diane Ackerman, we are listening as our metal eyes wake to absolute night, where whispers fly from the beginning of time. We cup our ears to the heavens. We are listening on the volcanic lips of Flagstaff and in the fields beyond Boston, in the great array that blooms like coral from the desert floor on high-wire webs patrolled by computer spiders in Puerto Rico. We are listening for a sound beyond us, beyond sound, searching for a lighthouse in the breakwaters of our uncertainty, an electronic murmur, a bright, fragile I am. Small as tree frogs staking out one end of an endless swamp, we are listening through the longest night we imagine, which dawns between the life and times of stars. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. Philip Booth, Maine poet, saying it, trying to say it, not to answer to logic, but leaving our very lives open to how we have to hear ourselves say what we mean. Not merely to know, all told, our far neighbors, or here, beside us now, the stranger we sleep next to. Not to get it said and be done, but to say the feeling, its present shape, to let words lend it dimension, to name the pain, to confirm how it may be borne. Through what in ourselves we dream to give voice to find some word for how we bear our lives. Daily, as we are daily wed, we say the world is a wedding for which, as we are constantly finding, the ceremony has not been found. What wine? What bread? What language sung? We wake at night to imagine, and again wake at dawn to begin, to let the intervals speak for themselves, to listen to how they feel, to give pause to what we're about, to relate ourselves over and over, in time beyond mind, to speak some measure of how we hear the music. Today, if ever to say, the joy of trying to say the joy. Thank you, Philip Booth. Next to last, me, your poet, speaking about my vital conversations, among the most vital. I talk with the oceans. Yes, and the rivers, the wind and the rain, the wildflowers, the marshes and salt grasses, with the woods and clouds, hills and hidden glades, with the moon, half or full, the treetops and bluely distant mountaintops, sand dunes, sunsets, early frosts, morning mists. Talk with them all, sometimes sing to them, with them, in poems on the page, for them. And last, for now, my friends, till we're together again over these airwaves, the daily bread. Maybe the greatest gift you can give is the daily bread of your body, the daily fruit of your heart, the daily wine of your mind, the daily spice of your voice, the daily water of your ever-arising spirit. Thank you again for leaning in, thinking and feeling in, being part of the exploration and conversation. Also, my appreciation for you sharing this and other show links around to friends and posting them out to your social media. When you recommend the broadcast, you definitely help interested listeners find their way here. Do feel free also to send inspirations you have from listening. Always welcome those. And consider, if you would, making a gift of some support for these free weekly broadcasts that I create to engage, inspire, and uplift you. If there's some yet covered theme you'd like to see a future broadcast on, send an email with your suggestion. Colin@thepoetorialist.com. And what about your experience of this show? On how we speak, how we listen? What thoughts, what feelings? And if, by the way, you are making a contribution, thank you very much. You can do that by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email, or you can mail a check along to me to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or donate through my site, thepoetorialist.com, by way of the Donate tab. On a related note, patrons can, yes, at times privately host or sponsor me as a working poet in residence to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to them. If that's you, email me to explore. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcast online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist. And you can, if you like, enter and explore the now flowing oasis of Regenesis that's open at last to the wide world that I'm guiding, the poetosphere.com. Yes. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here soon again. Until then, dear listeners, may you speak in ever more fully and clearly and resonantly from and with your whole, wholly present being, spirit, zest, and listen ever more actively, deeply, and completely. Wait till you see how it enriches every conversation, every dialogue, every exchange, no matter how small or large, how light or serious. Get ready to be amazed. Good night to you, and good spirits.